Right. Covered already till importing data till day 12, and then we are left with 8 more days. And then today we'll cover configuration management, CMDB. Now, just understand this, right? So why at the first place do we need CM? What is CMDB? Let's understand this first. So CMDB is called as configuration management database. When I say configuration management database, which means it is a database which manages the configurations, right? And when I say configurations, configuration items actually. So when you say configuration item, this is a component which is required to deliver a service. For example, if I were to host a SAP application, then I'll need to host it on a server. I'll need to host it on a database. I need to have some app servers, web servers, some middleware, some load balancers. The entire infrastructure I have to build for any service to be offered, right? So I'm talking about IT services. Even if you take the example of non-IT services, in that case, you might not have servers, ESX, VMs, databases, but you'll have their own components. Whatever, for example, you're building a car, you will need, you are into cars delivery system, then you need to build an entire ecosystem. That how do you purchase a car, how do you acquire a car, how do you build a car, how do you sell a car, and then the entire life cycle, right? So idea is that in order to deliver a product or a service, you need some components, right? This is a complete hierarchy which you have to build to deliver a service. You have to build an entire ecosystem. Now, in that entire ecosystem, everything else, which is everything in that ecosystem, is called as a configuration item. So a configuration item is actually, so if I go and if I tell you the official definition of configuration item, I can show you that quickly. Give me a second. Right. So this is ideal PDF, right? So whenever we are trying to find out any definitions, right, this is the best place to find it out. When I say configuration item, I think I'll get it here immediately. This is the official definition of configuration item. Okay, this says any component or other service asset that needs to be managed in order to deliver an IT service. This is where you have to manage the entire configuration items to deliver a service, and this is where and the process to manage that part is called as configuration management. And a database which is storing those records throughout the life cycle is called as configuration management database. So for example, if I go back to this layer, right, this is a general model, a multi-tier architecture which you have in any service organization, not organization, in any enterprise services. You have a data center, it may be on-premise data center, it may be a cloud data center, you may have a network layer. I'm not talking about physical versus virtual right now. I'm just taking a normal example. You have a circuits, firewall, switches. On top of that, you have a storage layer. On top of that, you have ESX. On top of that, you have servers and VMs. On top of that, you have databases. You have middleware layers, you have load balancer layers. On top of those databases, you have application servers, services, technical services, and then you have business services. So this business services is something which we are delivering to as a company. I am offering these services to my clients, to my customers. This is called a business service for me. For example, somebody is offering a service of ServiceNow implementation, and that would be the business service. So whenever you go to any website and you see there are services, those are the actual business services which that company offers. Now, underlying components of those services, to deliver that service, they must have an entire ecosystem in the backend, right? That entire ecosystem of those components is actually called as configuration management database. So in ServiceNow also we follow the same thing. Before I go to ServiceNow, I just want to tell you a basic simple difference between asset and CI. So there is this concept of asset versus CI. So asset is something which is which is a resource, or I would say anything which is required to be delivering services. Again, it is similar to configuration item. The difference in asset is, for asset, you have a financial value attached to it. For example, if I were to say server as a configuration item, it is required to deliver a service, maybe a SAP service, for example. But the server itself is an asset for the company because it has some value, it has a financial value, it has some intrinsic value, and you have to manage it through the life cycle of the asset also. It means you have purchased an asset, you have provisioned it now, you are now building it, you are operating it, now you're retiring it. So all of those stages of asset management, they go a little differently as that of configuration items. They have some similarities in terms of the same server is used as a configuration item when talk about service delivery. The same server is being used as an asset in terms of its life cycle, in terms of a company's value, right? Now, again, if I go back to that same screen, I tell you the definition of assets. Let's understand the definition of asset also. Here, if I show you asset, right, it says any resource or capability is called an asset. So you have multiple things. For example, it can be a management asset, organizational asset, process, knowledge, people, information, application. This is an ideal definition, but then we will not go into this particular scenario too much, because from ServiceNow perspective, we generally consider assets as a hardware or a software. We are not going into people, process, organization, all that stuff. But what I'm trying to tell you is there are situations, there are cases wherein you have something being considered as a CI because it is part of a service delivery, while it may not be an asset. Because, for example, I'll tell you, right, anything logical. For example, if I say a SAP business service, no, it is a logical thing. You cannot see a SAP business service as such. It is not a server. It is not something which you can see or touch or feel, right? It is more about a logical component or a logical interface for the user who is using that service for them. Now, when I say asset, I'm talking about a physical asset here. For example, I'm talking about a server. I'm talking about a network switch. Those are those things which I can see and feel. So generally, those physical items are termed as assets in ServiceNow. Even you have software assets. So if I search this word, you have this asset, wherein you have all assets, hardware assets, software entitlements, other assets. You have multiple things. We'll not go much into that because it is not required for this examination. All we need to understand is that ServiceNow has two things. One is asset, second is configuration. And as a part of this particular course, we have to focus on configuration items, which is called as CI. Now, if I come here and I will show you configuration, right? Let's see this. So many things you have under configuration. So this is your configuration menu, which I was just talking about. It has a lot of things. We will talk about these are some advanced stuff which we don't need to bother about. But what we need to bother about is you have services, you can have business services, you can have technical services, right? For example, server patching is a technical service. Database patching is a technical service. Whereas SAP is itself a business service which you're offering to your users, right? Then you have all these application servers. You have all these kind of servers: Tomcat, WebLogic, WebSphere, Java, JBoss, Dominoes. You have servers, Linux, Windows, Unix, ES, a lot of stuff. You have clusters, you have database servers, you have database instances also. You have database catalogs, you have networks, switches, servers, gears, routers, switches. Then you have load balancers, you have data centers, you have infra services like email, FTPs. All of these are technical services, infrastructure services, right? VMwares, you have entire vCenter, ESX servers, clusters. So there are so many things in ServiceNow which are already there inbuilt in systems. So you don't need to create a new table to store something, because most probably 99% chances are there that you'll find that table in ServiceNow already there. You just need to put your data into the table. That's the whole idea about configuration management database. Now, when I say that, now let's go back to the screen. Now, just imagine a situation. For example, if I am doing a change, and just imagine this, all of this is interconnected, which means you have a data center, as I told some time back, that this is the entire layer. Now, on this layer, you have this interconnectivity here, which means on the switch, you have this particular ESX, and on that ESX, you have a VM. On that VM, a database is running. So which means, just imagine the situation. If I do anything with the switch, it will impact the entire upstream layer, up till business services. Because if this goes down, ESX will go down, ESX will go down, server will go down, server will go down, database will go down, database will go down, your application services will go down, and then it will result in impact in the business service. So the real benefit of configuration management is to do the impact analysis of any configuration item, of any incident. For example, somebody has thrown an error from monitoring system saying that I have a problem at the storage layer. Now you should be able to determine as a support team member or as a ServiceNow user that because I have a problem in this XYZ storage, where will it impact? Which services will it impact? This is the power of the platform. This is where the configuration management database is very, very important. And that is why it is called as heart of the entire ITL processes, or you can say even in this case ServiceNow, it is actually acting as a heart of ServiceNow. Because if you don't have that relationship in system, then you will not be able to do that impact analysis. Whatever incident you're raising, everything is standalone. That does not make any sense, because the real power of IT service management comes into that factor. You are proactively able to determine the impact analysis. You're able to contain the impact of an incident, because you know how are they interconnected to each other in order to deliver a service. That's the whole idea, right? So that was the idea, that this is why you use configuration management, database, and CMDB. Now, as I was showing you sometime back, you have all these tables already in ServiceNow, where you can see all of those things clearly, right? Now, and this is where you actually do that. So you also do the entire phase of CI, which is you identify the CI, you control it, you manage it, and you verify it. Okay, this is all good. It is a part of service delivery. I can go ahead with that and we can use it. So one more important thing is, if I do not, for example, I have all these things in system, all of these things separately, standalone mode, and I don't have any relationships built between them. Do you think in that case you will be able to determine impact? Because everything is lying on its own. There is no holistic approach. There is no relationship between them. Then you will never be able to understand, if I do anything here, where will it change things, right? And for example, change management, it plays a very important role in incident, problem, change, or any of the IT functions, to be honest. Even availability, capacity, all of those functions which we talk about generally for as an IT service management function, we will need to ensure that we have the right CMDB, which is auto updated mostly as much as possible. It is verified continuously, right? Which means it should not be the case that you have done it today and after some time it becomes stale and is of no use. So we should have that automation in place, which allows you to actually ensure that the system is updated all the time. It is not getting stale, and these relationships are important. And that is generally possible when you have some kind of automation built in. If you are doing everything manually, then definitely you can't achieve it. In any case, you can't achieve it, because you need a lot of people to just do that stuff, which does not justify the cost around that particular part if you have people managing all of this, right? That is why you need to have a process framework, first of all, that how will my configuration management look like? What all things I need to, for example, for a company, a keyboard or a mouse is an asset. It is a computer peripheral, so it is an asset because it has some cost, right? May not be a significant cost. They don't want to track the cost, fair enough. But it is not a configuration item, because this keyboard and mouse is not used in service delivery as such. I'm talking about service delivery, I'm talking about more in terms of the entire enterprise layer, which on which the entire things are hosted. All of this is hosted, right? This is where when we do asset management, we generally talk about finances there, cost and finances. Unless you have an angle of cost and finances, you can just get away with configuration management. That is enough for you. But yes, if you want to track finances also, you want to track an asset lifecycle in terms of procurement, provisioning, then you have to think about asset, otherwise not. But again, as a part of this course, we need to just focus on the configuration management part, right? So this is something which I was talking about. Now, let me show you something in system. Now, there is a table called CMDB.list. This is called as, so if you remember, I've told you on that day that whenever you want to open a table, you just need to type the table name .list in capital. So it will open it in new window. This is a table name which is called as base configuration item. This is the parent table for the entire configuration. But there is one more table which is called as CMDB CI.list. This is called as configuration item. So generally, all your tables in ServiceNow CMDB are extended from this one. This table is extended from this table. I mean, configuration item is extended from base configuration item. But all our tables in configuration item, for example, Windows Server, Linux servers, hardware, network device, all of that is extended from this. So this is the most important table for you when you talk about configuration. If you're not looking for a specific class, for example, you're not looking for a server, you're not looking for a network device, you're looking for the entire thing, then you should open this particular table, because it will have a lot of child tables. And the way ServiceNow works is that if you open the parent table, you'll be able to see all the records of the child tables in that particular view. So if I am right now, I'm opening CMDB CI list, So for example, let me just do a group by class here. So this is where it will tell you that what all classes do I have in CMDB as of today in terms of records, right? You may have more classes. So you can see this AIX servers, applications, security license servers, ServiceNow components, Java server, business applications, business capability, clusters. So all of those things which I was just talking about, Oracle instance, when I was showing you the menu on the left-hand side, routers, switches, Linux. So all of these, you have so many records of so many. So there are around 75 classes, right? 76 classes right now in the system, in the demo system. I mean, when you do it, the real implementation, you might have records even running in millions sometimes. So I have been in a situation where records were in millions actually. So this is where you can see, this is where you can do the group by class. This is again the list interface which we talked about in our initial classes. So I've not done anything special here. I'm just trying to tell you that this is where you can see what kind of things do I have here. Right now, you want to find out, okay, I just want to focus on a switch. Then you go here and just click on the switch. And you can see the form of the switch. This is where you have the switch thing. Right? All of the attributes are on the switch. Now, let's open a server, for example. And this is where you have the overall picture of configuration management, that all of these kind of records are there. Now, do you have any questions in the previous point which we discussed? Or should we move ahead? Okay. So now just see this. This is a form of a Linux server, right? And these are the out-of-the-box attributes which you are having on this form. You may have a value there, you may not have a value, which is fine. But it depends on your organizational management that what kind of attributes do they want you to track for a particular configuration item. Generally, these are all the attributes which you generally track for any configuration item. So this is where you have the entire attribute level view. Okay, for this particular Linux of 116, I have so many things here. Asset tag, manufacturer, class, comments, company, serial number, host name, department, RAM, CPU, all of that information, right? This is the attribute section, which is the form view. Now, see a few more things here, right? For example, this is where you have related items, which means with which thing it has a relationship. So you can see it has a relationship with the ESX because it is virtual Linux server. That is why it is hosted on a ESX server. That is why I was talking about this part. If you remember this diagram, this is talking about that servers are hosted on ESX, for example, VMs are hosted on ESX. So this is a server which is hosted on this particular ESX. So this is a relationship. Now, for example, if I want to raise a change, or if I have an incident which I know that it has an impact, and that incident has an impact on this particular CI, then I will know that all those servers, for example, let me just show you that. All those servers which are attached to this particular ESX will have problems. So you can see this. So this ESX is virtualizing these three servers. So if this ESX goes down, it will have an impact on these three servers immediately. This is where the power of configuration management comes into play. That is why you need to have those relationships intact in the system. So this is where you find out relationships in this particular area. Now, if I were to shoot for you a few more things, you have this loading related list. So the attributes which are not primary of this particular server, but then they have some importance. They have some, for example, it has a network adapter, it has file systems, it has storage devices, it has software installations, running processes. So all of this information generally gets filled in when you run discovery from some automated sources, because nobody can give you this information manually. This is where it becomes all the more important to use some automation tools in the system to bring all this information. Now, for example, if I were to calculate software licenses cost, then I have to find out the software installations running on the device. I want to see if this has some space left, the server has some space left. I'm not saying you don't have tools to manage all of that. You have those tools already with the infrastructure teams who are doing that. But this is where you can get a centralized view across all CI items, which means you don't need to go to server team to find out about servers. You don't need to go to database team to find out about databases. You don't need to go to network team to find about networks. You can do all of that in as a single system All of that can be done here, and you can schedule the discovery. So you can bring the data every week, every day, whatever you want to schedule it for. You can do that. So this is called as related list view, which means it will show you some other attributes which are not shown in the parent form, but are again important from the configuration management perspective. This is where it shows the relationships. This is very important here. Can you see the button called Discover Now? Because I have Discovery enabled here. That is why it has Discover Now. So if I show Discover Now, I mean, I cannot do it right now because I don't have the entire ecosystem running in the backend. For Discovery, I need to do a few more things, which I'll talk about in detail in some more time. So idea is that this is where you have, this is the form. You're currently in the form view. If I were to go to dashboard view, this is the dashboard view. Let it open. It tells you about the attributes. Is that CI having complete information, completeness? Is it having any audit issues? No. Compliance not applicable. Correctness. Does it have any duplicate entries? Does it have any orphan entries? Does it have any stale entries? Right. It shows up here. Relationships. Do you have any wrong relationships anywhere? This is where you've seen the relation formatter, right? And this is where you see if there's any change on that CI, on any incident of that CI, any task of that CI. You can see there is a task, duplicate records found, for example. Any business service on that CI, any alert on that CI. So this is where you can see the dashboard. Now, if I come back to the form view, we will not go much into these details because this will be another detailed class about completeness, compliance. But just to make you understand, to make sure that your CMDB is continuously updated, accurate, because it is important. If you have wrong relationships in CMDB, you'll have wrong impact analysis, which is where you can have failed changes. You can have incidents which are causing multiple problems. So to ensure that all of those things are intact, you need to ensure that your CMDB is accurate, up to date, all the time updated, no duplicacies there, no orphan records are there. When I say orphan record, which means it should have a parent associated. For example, I have a server which has to be used by some application. Otherwise, why is that server there in system in the first place? This is where you can also do the cost optimization, because when you run this discovery, you find out that, okay, so many devices are lying unused. There are no relationships for those devices. Then why are we paying cost for that? Either we reuse them for something else, or we retire them and save some cost. This is where you do the asset management, configuration management together in terms of finding out how can you bring the value. So what I'm saying is CMDB helps you get the value in multiple cases. As I said, your entire incident problem change, or all of those things, availability, capacity, all of those things, as well as a cost, because all of these assets have a cost associated to it, right? It's every server, every database is a cost. You are paying for licenses, you're paying for hardware, you're paying for software. This is where it becomes all the more important to ensure that you are not paying something unnecessarily. That is why those optimization exercises always start from the CMDB thing. If you do not have this handy, then your optimization exercises will be not so much useful as they would be. Now, if I go back to form view, I am again back to the form, showing you what are things there. Now, how do you add this relationship? This is very important. First of all, before I add the relationship, let me show you something called as dependency view. So you will see a visual map for the same relationship which you are looking at the system there, right? Let me show you that. Do you see this here? This is interesting view. It tells you everything. Oh my God, it's this is how it is linked. You can see the relationships, you can see everything. Right? You can see a lot of stuff here. Now, if I were to, so which means it is all of these Linux servers are connected to this ESX servers. And all of this particular cluster is connected to this data center. This data center is connected to this vCenter. This is where you can see things, right? Now, if I right click on any of these items, I can see the form of that particular CI. So for example, if I were to go to this one, I click on here, I can see the form view of that CI. I can see the entire map. The map is only for that CI. Right now, the map is at the ESX server. Now it will be at the focus of that map will be this particular Linux server, right? You can see view related tasks. I mean, there is anything which is for the CI, you can see that. You can see view affected CIs. You can see any outages because of a CI. You can see relationship. You can add relationship here. You can run a layout from here. You can have multiple things, but you don't need to kind of do everything right now. It is just for your information that, okay, what all information do we have? For example, if I click here, I can click here also, and then also I can get the same thing. Or I do right click here, then also I get the same thing. Then this is vertical map, where it is top to bottom. This is a horizontal view. This also looks good, right? Okay, this is how it is connected. If I show you radial view, it will be in center. So your ESX will be in center. Force view, group view. Then they are grouping by classes. Cluster is separate, data center is separate, vCenter is separate, servers are separate. So you might need to view them in different scenarios, which you can see always. Now this is where you can see details around it. So otherwise, these menus are enabled. I'm not sure why are they not coming up right now. But then, yeah, this is how generally you see the dependency view, and then you can change the map settings also. We'll not go into much detail around that map settings, how can you change it, but then you can just explore that in your personal instance. Okay, what happens where, for example, I can filter a CI by location, I can filter a CI by CI type. So multiple options are there. You can do all of that. This is where it shows you the power of dependency view, and this is where it is a very strong visualization. I must tell you, when you do the impact analysis, literally, this is where you actually use the system to show you, okay, where all it might have impact. So this is very interesting view, which generally happens. Also, where you kind of do change management and you're raising changes, this is where you want to trigger approvals or trigger notifications to the affected parties. For example, if the ESX team is doing a patching on this ESX server, and they have selected that ESX server as a configuration item or on a particular change, in that case, it should trigger an approval for the owners of these servers, because they will be directly impacted because of this, right? Now, let me show you some more things. Flat tree layout. So this is upstream, downstream relationships. So all of this is kind of upstream relationship. That ESX is the base of it, and everything is on top of it. This is, I always prefer this view, downstream versus upstream, because it can tell you, okay, so if I go back to the diagram, upstream means anything this layer. For example, if I talk about ESX here, this is all upstream, and this is all downstream. So if I do any change here, it will not have any impact here, like simple logical common sense. If I do something here, then it will have an impact here on top of it. That is why your impact should always be focused on the upstream, not on the downstream part, right? This is one more way to look at it. You have multiple views, you have multiple, for example, if I do a flat, then also you can do, for example, you can see right now L1, L2, L3, because your relationships are filtered at level 3. So you can see, you're seeing, when I say L3, which means this is, for example, for the server, this is L1, this is L2, this is L3. How many levels down you're going? This is where L1, L2, L3 comes into play. So generally, when you trigger approvals, you trigger approvals for L1 level, at max for L2, but not for L3, because generally at this level, in any organization, this layer is redundant in nature, resilient in nature, which means you always have a backup running, and it is making sure that there is no impact on the direct servers or databases. That is why all of this infra layer is kind of, high redundant layer. So I do this, for example, filter 1, then you only see L1. If I do 2, then you will see L1 plus L2. If I do 3, then you will see L1 plus L3. If I do 4, you might see more. There is nothing at L4, so it is not showing me anything, right? You can also filter by relationship types. Okay, which relationship type I am talking about. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay.
No, look.
No, right? Okay. Now, all of this relationship is actually stored under a table called CMDB RELCI.list. You might be asked a question that which is the table which is used to store all the relationships. So this is where you have, so the name of the table is called CI relationships, and this is where you have all these relationships For example, if I just want to do a parent Linux and see. Okay, so you can see this Linux server 61 virtualized by ESX61. That is what we saw in that diagram also just now, even in that on that form, that ESX61 virtualizes this server. So how to read this? This is very important in terms of parent and child. So when I'm reading this, I have to read it like this: Linux server 61 is virtualized by ESX61. When I read it in the reverse format, I should be reading it ESX61 virtualizes Linux server 61. So in that case, this becomes parent and this becomes child. For example, your Linux app, which is generally an app, it's depending on a database here. This is Oracle database, right? So the point is, this is how you really you kind of read the relationships from a parent to a child. And there are so many relationships. I'm just showing the records. Even you might have things beyond these records. You've connected to, connects to, connected by, consumes, consumed by, depends on, used by. So there are so many things, right? For example, this particular business service is depending on BlackBerry. This business service depending on email. So there are so many relationships. We cannot go in so much of detail right now. The idea I'm trying to tell you is that all the relationships which we were looking at that form, when we were looking at this form, here, all of this is stored under this table called CI relationships. Okay. And this is how you study them. You read them, parent versus child. And there are so many types of relationships which we have here. Now, all of these types are actually defined in something called suggested relationships on a CMDB. Now, let me show you where it is defined. For example, if I go back to configuration, or maybe rather than that, I just type the word suggested. So you see this hierarchy, configuration. Under configuration menu, you have called relationships. Under that, you have a suggested relationship. So generally, ideally seeking best practices that we should keep only the suggested relationships for a particular record. Here it is. Yeah. This is where it tells you, okay, for a particular base class, or you can just read it like this: parent is how a parent is related to a child class. For example, if I were to do a server here, let me see. So can you see this here before it gets filtered on? Circuit is fed by UPS. Circuit powers rack. Maybe I don't, yeah. So let me group by base class here. So the idea of this course actually is to make you familiar with where the things are. How can you look around things for, and what are those items at high level which you can understand. Now, for example, AIX server. Now, AIX server owns dispatch. AIX server uses router interface. AIX server owned by this particular instance. AIX server. So this is a class level relationship, not an item level relationship, which means it is valid for the entire AIX server class. This is where the class is important. When I'm talking about class, which means it has an IP connection to IP switch. It owns this IP address. It contains this file system. It owns this network adapter. This is where you have been shown all the suggested relationships for any class for that matter. Any class. If I were to show you circuit, right? We have this circuit is fed by UPS, circuit is powered by powers rack, circuit power server. So this is where you have defined it. Already ServiceNow is defined out of the box relationship for most of the things. If you think still it is not defined, you can go up and define it here. Right? Now, how will it impact you? How does it help you? If I go back to this view, and if I were to create a relationship, I'll click on here. When I click on here, see what happens. This is where this box is automatically enabled. Use suggested relationships. So now this data is coming from that particular area. Okay. Now, which means in that system, they have already defined that Linux server contains as a relationship which is parent. So wherever it is written as parent, which means Linux server is acting as a parent. Wherever it is child, which means Linux server is acting as a child. System is literally slow right now. Okay, it is fine. So when I'm saying Linux, I'm trying to build a new relationship in system. Then I have selected contains. Then what can it contain? It can contain a NAS file system, a file system. All of these are auto-filled. Can you see this, right? You can change this filter, you can close this filter, you can clear this filter, but then now it will give you a very interesting thing that, okay, generally, as per ServiceNow CMDB, they tell you that Linux server should be containing, as a parent, should be containing all these items: NAS file system, Kubernetes pod, memory module, disk partition, and whatever data is there, it has come up here. Now, if I were to select, for example, this one, and if I were to add this relationship, I'll have to add it here, plus, and I can do, so I can read it now. Linux server contained by local HD. This is how you read it: parent, type, and child. Linux server 116 contains local HD. If you want to read it reverse, local HD is contained by Linux server 116. This is where the concept changes, and this is very important for any ServiceNow guy to understand these relationships. It is very important because you are going to use them in a lot of things going forward. Okay. Now I can just click on save and exit, and the relationship will be saved, and I'll be able to see that in the system. Now, for example, depends on. Now, if I select depends on here, I'm not going to show you everything, of course, but then this is the idea. I'm just trying to tell you that, okay, this is how you add a relationship. Now, when I click on depends on, it will automatically filter the records accordingly. Now, it will depend on a computer or a computer peripheral. This is how, otherwise you can add your own classes. That is not a big problem. You can always do that. But because I have selected contains in the previous case, that is why it has contained here. If I want to select this item, then it will create a relationship for depends on. For example, let me select this one. And if I do this plus, it shows depends on used by. The same depends on used by. So these are suggested relationships. Generally, people prefer to use the ones which are in blue. The ones which are here are generally not so much used. You can use it if you want to, but then generally people focus on the ones. If I filter it out, what will happen? I am not getting any option, right? I'm not getting any option here. Now I have to just add anything and see. Now it is asking you which relationship do you want to build. This is the differences. That is why everybody uses this particular thing always. This is how you add relationships between different CIs. Now, either you import them from any tool or you build them manually in system. If you have to import them, you have to import them in this table, CMDB CI relationships, right? Because this is where the actual data resides. And this is where you can see all of those things, okay, what belongs to what. Now, any questions on that part? We have talked about it. There's some more thing which is like discovery, service mapping, but we'll talk about them later because we don't have much time. But then I think you understood the concept of upstream, downstream. What does upstream mean? What does downstream mean? Right?
Yeah.
Right. Now, see, I'll show you a few interesting things as well here. There are some roles which are required. There are some roles which are required to access the CMDB. Now you have to have either asset role, ITIL role, ITIL admin role, or CMDB read role. Now this is a very interesting use case. For example, if I were to give, see, read permission, people can give to all the ITIL users because they can read it, they can see it, okay, how are things related. But then if I were to update any record, then I should be getting only the filtered access, which means I should be able to update only a server record. I should not be, if I am from server team, I should not be able to update a network record because that is against integrity. You cannot